Mad Movie Mark, another Mad Movie Mark movie review. Thank you for joining me as I review the 1945 Italian Neorealist movie, Rome Open City.
Saint-Roch n'est pas assez grand.
Oh, come on, you have to be at least a little bit interested. That's why you clicked on the link, right? So I'm reviewing every movie that has 100% fresh rating of Rotten Tomatoes. I'll give them all a score of 1 to 10. After I review them all and score them all, I will rank them from worst to best. I started in the 1920 silent movie era, and now I'm at 1945 with Rome Open City. So this movie stars Anna Magani as Pina, Aldo Fabrizi as Don Pietro, Marcello Pagillo as Giorgio, Francesco as Francesco, and Harry Feist as Major Bergman. This movie has a 100% fresh rating from the critics and a 91% fresh rating from the audience. So it is on, I would say, the middle to higher scale for the audience score. This movie, it starts off kind of in a house. The Nazis are trying to arrest Giorgio. He's the communist leader of a resistance against the Nazis. He goes to Francesco's house, who is another resistance fighter, and at his house there is Pina, who is Francesco's pregnant fiancée. So why Giorgio is at Pina and Francesco's house, he contacts Don Pietro, who is a Catholic priest, and he asks Pietro to transfer messages and money to other resistance fighters. So Pietro can easily get through kind of the Nazi lines because he is a priest, and they're not looking at him as closely as they would, say, these resistance fighters, because I think that they assume that since he is a priest, that he is not involved with the resistance.
Bien, va jouer, Marcel. Va faire un peu d'exercice.
Elle a dit que vous veniez tout de suite dans la maison. Pour une chose importante.
So they ask him if he is able to transfer these messages and this money to the other resistance fighters. At Francesco's apartment, it is eventually raided. Giorgio gets away, but Francesco is hauled away in a in like a car. So when Francesco is hauled away in this car, Pina she is just beside herself. She is in this frantic mode where nothing else exists in her life. She needs to get to Francesco because he's about to be hauled away and sent to, one of those camps, or he's being hauled away and something very bad is going to happen to him, and she knows this. So she is frantic, and she frantically runs down this tunnel, and then she gets herself past these Nazi guards, and then we see her running through the city, and she's yelling like, Francesco, Francesco, and she's running through the city trying to get to him, and then kind of all of a sudden she is gunned down by one of the Nazis. And we see her laying in the street. Now, this is an important scene in not only this movie, but in kind of the neo-realistic history. This is one of the most iconic scenes in not only neo-realistic, but also in movie history, where she's gunned down and she's lying in the street. Her son then comes up to her, yelling, "Mom, Mom, no, no." And then Pietro comes up to her also and is kind of holding her and hugging her. Her son Marcello is also sort of part of this resistant movement in that he is a child and he is working with other children in this town, in this city, to build bombs.
Je suis fier de vous. Maintenant.
And to throw bombs off buildings and to hit people with bombs. So he is also so old and young. It doesn't matter. Everyone has the same motive, which is to attack these Nazis and attack these people with whatever means they can. So even as a child, he is part of this resistance group as well. Later on in the movie, there's a scene with Giorgio and his girlfriend where he's in his girlfriend's apartment. His girlfriend's Marina, and he realizes that she has drugs at her place, and then they begin fighting, arguing over kind of the drugs and the way she's living in her apartment.
C'est la vie.
La vie est comme on veut bien qu'elle soit.
Des mots, tout ça. La vie est une chose immonde, abjecte. Je la connais, la misère. Elle me fait peur, elle.
This then leads her to betray both him and Francesco. Once they're betrayed, Bergman offers, so Giorgio and Pietro end up getting caught by Bergman. Bergman, who is the Nazi leader, he offers Giorgio leniency in return for betrayal of his fellow resistance fighters. He refuses to do this and is tortured. So he is tortured quite a bit in this movie. He is like set on fire with a blowtorch. He's whipped. And Bergman, after a long time, he refuses to give up any information. After Giorgio is tortured and they realize that he's not going to give them any information and that he's not going to speak up, Bergman kind of goes to his other officers and let him know what's going on. And I think they kind of like lose faith in the fact that their messaging is that they are of the master race. And there's this other officer there who's drunk, but he gives this like really poignant, I think a poignant and great speech about how it's kind of sarcastic about how they're the master race. And I think it's a very good speech, and it's probably one of my favorite parts of this entire movie.
Nicht weiter als Morden, Morden, Morden. Ganz Europa haben wir mit Leichen übersät. Und auf diesen Gräbern wächst unaufhaltsam der Hass. Hass, überall Hass. Wir werden vom Hass vertilgt.
So Bergman turns to Pietro and he says, hey, like, you need to get your guy here to give us some information. And Pietro says, you think that I can make him give you information? No matter what I say to him, he's not going to talk and he's not going to give you what you want. So after this, they then force Pietro to watch the further torture of Giorgio until he is ultimately killed through this torture.
Tu n'as pas parlé.
He's just tortured so much that he is unable to take it any further. Then after he is killed, the next day, Don Pietro is put up to a firing squad because he was also aiding the resistance. So they want to make an example of him. So they end up putting him. They ask him if he's like afraid to die, or they tell him not to be afraid to die. And then he says, "Oh, they're like." He gives a speech about how anyone can die, but not everyone can be like a good human being.
Courage.
Oh, c'est facile de bien mourir. Ce qui est difficile, c'est de bien vivre.
And then he ends up going up into the firing squad, and they end up killing him as well. So that's a very brief overview of this movie. So what do I think about the movie? This movie is a probably very important piece of cinema as far as neorealism goes. It was made right after the Nazi occupation, so the film crew had a hard time getting materials like cameras and film and different things that they needed. So the quality of this film is very poor. When I was watching it, there were a lot of times where the audio just cut out or the scenes were incredibly dark and hard to see. Now, I did find a better version of this movie online, but unfortunately there were no captions, and so I wasn't able to watch it because I wouldn't clearly understand what's going on. But the version that I watched was a really rough movie, a really rough version of a movie. It was a little bit hard to watch because of that, but I understand why this happened, and I understand the situation that was going on when they made this movie. The acting in this movie is really good. The cinematography for what they were working with was really good, and there are a lot of points in this movie, especially where Pina is killed, that are pretty powerful moments. The fact that she is then her son then runs in and tries to make sure that she's still alive and she's not. It's a very powerful movement. The powerful moment. The torturing is also a powerful moment in the movie too. The graphicness at which they show the torture. I mean, there was torture in the Day of Wrath movie as well, but they cut away from like the scenes of torture and they just showed the woman on on a table, but they never actually showed like any torture of how she was tortured. But this movie definitely shows what his body looks like when he's tortured. And then of course the ending is very powerful too, because you have Pietro, who is this Catholic priest who helped these resistance fighters when, I mean, obviously he didn't have to help them, but he helped them the whole way through. He is like the hero of this movie. And then at the end, for him to be killed and to like accept the fact that he's going to be killed and to understand that he's going to be killed. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful film. There's a lot of scenes. If you understand like the history, like I try to do a lot of research on the history of this movie and what made this movie so powerful and like what makes this movie so great. And I think that if you're willing to do the history, to do the research, and you're willing to understand why this movie is so great, then you will have a really good understanding of it and you will appreciate it a lot. And I appreciate what they were doing, how hard it was for them to make this movie at the time, and then, just what they had to go to actually get this film finished. And like I said, though, it is a rough, grainy type movie. The sound does cut in and out. To be perfectly honest, I had to kind of Wikipedia or look up some of the movie because I watched the movie all the way through, but I was a little lost at like the characters and kind of what was going on. I don't know why. This isn't necessarily, it's not like a film noir where it's confusing and hard to follow, but for some reason I just didn't get it at first. So I had to go back and kind of research what was going on and I went back and rewatched a little bit of the movie, and it's a really good movie. Now, the only thing I would say that is against this movie, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but you don't really get a lot of background on these characters. So when I was researching this movie, I saw that Pina is supposed to be like the central focal point of this movie. She's supposed to be like the main character. But when I was watching it, I didn't really get that at all. I felt like there was no real central character. Like all these characters are equally important. And it wasn't until the moment where she's killed that you say, okay, maybe that she is like supposed to be a central part of this movie. Maybe we are supposed to be paying more attention to her, but I really felt that everyone like had equal weight in this movie. I had a really hard time keeping track of who the guys were. I think that's because the movie was so grainy for me that I had a trouble like keeping track of their faces and who they were. So that would be like, but of course it's because of what they had to work with. But for me, they didn't really give these characters a lot of backstory. So the movie is like an hour and 45 minutes long. If they were able to, if they had the means to do so, I would have liked to get more backstory on these characters. Because when Pena dies, yes, it's tragic that she dies because she has a child, she's pregnant. None of this she asked for. This was all brought onto her. She was supposed to be getting married. She's just someone who's like living her life. And for it to be taken so unjustly, yes, that is a powerful moment in the movie. But I would have liked to know a little bit more about like her, or I would have liked to know a little bit more about Francesco or Giorgio or any of them. Like I would like to have some sort of backstory on these people's, and then even Pietro, like how he got into this situation. I just wanted to know more about the characters that I'm supposed to be invested in, because honestly, until Pena died, I wasn't all that invested in her character. I was watching the tragicness that's unfolding and all of this, but I wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm just desensitized to stuff like this, but I just wasn't invested in any of these characters. And even at the end with Giorgio and Francesco. I'm not invested in any of them at all, and I wish I was, but I'm just not at all. So that would have been something that I would, I would have liked to have more of a background on these characters. All in all, I would say that honestly, in all honesty, I'm not like I don't have a film background. I didn't take any film courses in school. I just tried to be like this regular person who is doing reviews. And if you're someone who's just watching the movie and you don't do any research, you don't know about the neorealism, the neorealistic movement, you don't know that this was like kind of done right after the occupation, so they had a hard time gathering materials and stuff. If you're just sitting down, you're just watching the movie, just because it has 100% fresh rating, and you just want to watch the movie, I don't know if you're really gonna get it, and if you're really gonna have that emotion towards it, you're really going to understand it, and you're really going to enjoy it that much. I don't know, and I don't know in today's world if people are going to take that extra time to watch it and to learn about it, or if they're just going to like kind of watch it and then move on to the next thing. This movie was really a really good movie. I enjoyed it. I don't know. Like I said, not knowing a lot about the characters kind of took me out of it a little bit, and it was just for some reason I just had a really hard time like focusing on it and keeping up with it and understanding it. And I don't know why my brain just kind of turned off at some point. Now, I understand this is a really famous movie. There are people who absolutely love this movie. It has a 91% fresh rating from the audience. And there are people who really get this movie, and that's fantastic. But I don't think I really got it on that kind of level, and I wish I did. I maybe need to watch it again. Like I tried watching it twice, but even at the second time, I really feel like I didn't really get what I was supposed to be getting, because I didn't feel like it was a 91% fresh movie. Sure, I know the background now a little bit, and I know why it's famous and all this, but if I'm just watching it as a movie, I don't really think it's 91% at all. And I know that this is probably going to be the one movie, if anyone criticizes me for not knowing anything and for not actually, being a good reviewer, it's going to be for this movie. But I really tried. I even thought about putting this off another couple of days, but then I thought, like, I don't think I'm going to understand it any better if I put it off for another couple of days, so I'm just going to do the review. But in all honesty, if I'm going to give a perfect, honest review, if I take into account like rewatchability, entertainment value, if I take into account everything that I've been taking into account for the other movies that I reviewed, this is going to get a 7.5 out of 10. I wasn't all that interested in the characters. I wasn't greatly interested in the action that was going on screen. I thought it was a little bit slow paced. So 7.5 out of 10. So go ahead and rip me if you want, because I truly understand that people love this movie. 91% from the audience is not a small percentage. So I truly understand that people love this movie. I just didn't. So 7.5 out of 10. My next review is going to be of The Killers. Thank you. Have a good day.